If you're just joining us, welcome to the Regeneration Podcast. I'm Josh Glazer, and I'm in the studio today, the three studios today with Aaron Tagert and James Craig, two of our coaches here at Regen. Here's what we're going to get after today. All of us have the experience of, in our own lives and in the lives of clients, walking with men and women they're wrestling with unwanted sexual behavior. They're trying to grow in sexual integrity. And they've made great progress in beginning to identify what's triggering their behaviors. But then they're a little bit at a loss as what to do about that. They maybe even made some good progress in recognizing what's triggered their behaviors and what they're actually feeling in the moment. So what they're looking for in the moment, but then they're still struggling. So we'll unpack that a little bit. But before we get there, guys, how you doing today? Give our listeners, give me a little bit of a 411, just so you can be a little human before we just make you voices on the podcast.
I woke up with a runny nose, Josh, but I think it's past. But I coming in pretty strong today. It's interesting because I slept in a little bit, didn't do my prayer time, and I'm actually finding so much life in prayer these days that I went on like a shortened prayer walk to pray for this meeting and every other thing we have going on today. So that's been a sweet spot for me, but a little disoriented in the morning, but kind of on my game now.
I love it. And I love the maturity to not be kind of the black and white, all or nothing. I miss my prayer time and that's it. But just like, I can do an abbreviated time. Praise
Absolutely.
God.
It's hard to figure out sometimes, but I was like, I need it. I'm going to run out on a 10-minute walk.
Awesome. Love it. Aaron, Ron, how you coming?
Yeah, well, speaking of maturity, it was a lot for me to hold back there when James was talking about his nose running, because I was thinking, oh, you better go catch it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's terrible. I know. I'm a dad of 4, so those jokes are a frequent part of my everyday living.
It's actually part of your brain development when you have kids, is the dad joke region of the brain comes into being. So it makes sense, Aaron.
And I think that, like the Joy Center, I think that's one area that just keeps
there
growing.
You go. Yeah, it's true.
Mine's just, parenting stuff. It's hard, running into some things, which, riffing about before we hit record, but it'll keep you on your toes. That's for darn sure. So here we are in the midst of parenting and living life and talking about some really important things.
Well, I'm grateful for you guys and the lives you live and being with me today. I am coming. Here's what I'd say about parenting. In my experience, parenting in my life does one of two things when it gets hard. And there has been a lot of hard in last couple of years, at least. It either turns me into a super worrier, not warrior, worrier, and everything's off, or it exposes how much I need prayer and calls me to it. I think I've to riff off you, James. I think I've been in the space of like, this is not optional anymore. I need prayer. My kids need prayer. The world needs prayer, for crying out loud. So yeah, but I'm eager for this conversation. All right. So let me set it up for us. And listeners, see if you recognize yourself in this. So if you're listening and unwanted sexual behaviors is part of the story for you, that's maybe why you're listening, or you've got a loved one and they're dealing with it. This is just kind of part of the process of learning this. But most often when people first walk through the door, they're only vaguely aware, if aware at all, that this pattern of returning to their unwanted sexual behaviors doesn't come out of nowhere. It doesn't just hit them on the side of the head out of the blue, that it's always preceded by some type of trigger. And here we define trigger as some type of emotional or physical pain or discomfort. There's something that set them off. And so part of the early work we do with people in recovery, whether it's in one of our groups or in our one-to-one coaching, is beginning to help them recognize and reflect, like, what are the triggers? What could that be? What could be the emotional pain or discomfort that's preceded this? Once they begin to recognize that, then we begin helping them to connect the dots with what's the story about that type of pain or discomfort in your life? Where did you first experience it? Why does it kick up so hard in that situation? And why do you typically feel so helpless to respond to that emotion or that pain, so that you end up running to something that you don't want in your life, the porn, or the act out in some way? It's a very high view flying over this, but then once you begin to recognize it, so if all that I just said to you is like foreign language to you, okay, then that gives you some places maybe to begin. And we'd love to walk with you. We got men and women on our team that would love to walk with you and help you uncover that stuff. So just reach out.
Well, and real quick, Josh, even the word
Yeah.
trigger, our culture uses it in a different way than you're using it. So you're really tying it. You're not just saying, hey, you triggered me and you should never trigger me. You're saying there's something in me being triggered from my past, which is an invitation for me to grow, not an invitation to shut down any possible trigger in my environment. So just a different, important difference that I think for a lot of people, it's new language or a different way to use the same language.
Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, this is the way that we use trigger, and even the way we understand culturally as people use trigger. We typically hold the view of, if you are triggered, that is your responsibility. Why you're triggered so intensely may involve a lot of other factors in your life, including things that are not your responsibility, but what you're going to do with it is yours. So this is not about creating a safe zone in your life that you're absolutely never triggered. We're all triggered in various ways. And so how are we going to grow up to be responding to our triggers, or said more plainly, to respond to the pain we experience with maturity, with grace, with godliness, as opposed to running to our isolated places, which end up leaving us acting out sexually. So, yeah. So guys, just any other gaps you want to fill in what I've said, but I'm curious to hear what you'd say, like, to the client or the friend or the spouse who would say, yeah, I get it. I recognize that, when I experience this type of interaction at work, I tend to feel pretty small, and I recognize it. And I've learned that has something to do with the relationship I had with my mom when I was a kid, because when I hit those similar situations back then, that's how she made me feel. She made me feel small. She treated me like that. Or, hey, I recognize that I'm typically tempted to act out sexually right before an exam or right after an exam. And I've begun unpacking, like, yeah, that's because, one, no one ever taught me that my sense of worth is embedded in who I am, not in how I perform. And so there's a lot of pressure on me that I feel internally about that. But on top of that, I never learned how to walk through difficult things in that way. So I've begun recognizing some of these, connecting some of these dots. But now what? Because I'm still feeling it. I'm still feeling the pain. I'm still feeling the discomfort, and I'm still tempted to act out. And it still looks like maybe the best option for me right now, because I don't want to continue to feel this pain or this discomfort. So, Aaron, let me kick it to you. You're talking to a friend, a client, someone in your church, and that's what they're saying. Where do you go?
Well, a couple things come to mind. One of them, just sort of initially, would be a little additional layer of, I think, curiosity. It's like, great, I think of it as kind of in terms of like a journey, right? Where you've been, where you're going, and the part you're just talking about is really being able to name a little bit about where you've been. Like you're getting some understanding about where you've been, but then where are you going? Where do you want to go? So being maybe shepherded through that in coaching or something, for sure. Yeah. But that's what starts to, come up for me, is like, okay, this is maybe like a part of my past, or like I'm understanding this more, and that's been helpful, but I'm still sort of stuck. I don't know what to do with that. So on that journey to move forward, you might need some help kind of figuring out, how do I move forward? And so that's one of the things that comes up for me. The other thing comes up for me too is taking this, to the Lord, asking the Lord. I think there are two really good questions that we can ask him. And oftentimes we are asking why questions, like, why haven't you taken this? Why is this so hard? Why? And it's like, okay, like the Lord hears those, but I don't think those are the right questions. I think reframing that to, uh, man, Lord, like I'm aware of, this happened when I was, in junior high, and as a result, like I can see how this is, my acting out is connected to this, and but then not knowing where to go from there. Okay, Lord, what do you want me to know about this? Give me some revelation, like sit with me in this. And there's actually, I think, an invitation there to be with him, and maybe to even be with others, like I said, coaching or whatever that might look like, community, a safe group if you're part of a group. But so asking the Lord sort of, what do you want me to know about this? Okay, like I've uncovered some things. I feel like maybe you even shared some things. Okay, and then the next layer is, what do you want me to do? Like, what are some things I can do, or what do you want me to know? How do I move forward with you in this so that that doesn't have the same effects? Those are a couple of things that come up for me.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I want to jump off that a little bit, because what Aaron's saying, first of all, when he says curiosity, is actually also an invitation to humility. I think for so many of us, we think we know more than we do. And it's such a humbling journey to go through recovery and recognize there are things I don't yet know, which then, if you're like me, means you're going to try to get God into the corner to kind of force his hand and say, God, I'm ready. You got to tell me, you got to remind me of this. You got to show me more. But he knows the process of unfolding in a way that we don't quite understand. He knows the maturity we have to be able to handle the process of unfolding our story in more depth, that we often, we'd like to think we're further ahead sometimes than we actually are in our maturity journey, at least speaking for myself. The other thing that Aaron said was, why can often be not really a question. It can be a, like, kind of shaking our fists at God type of thing, which, God can handle it. Don't be afraid to go to him with anything, really. But Kurt Thompson points out in his book, Anatomy of the Soul, why is the wrong question for getting curious about our story. Obviously, we want to know why. Like, so in that sense, it's the right question. We're trying to get underneath why did I do this? Why do I struggle in these ways? But he actually says, when you're listening to another person's story, don't ask them why they're doing something. Ask them who, what, when, where, or how. How did you feel when that was happening? What was going on in that environment? And I've noticed this even in my own marriage. There are times where my wife, maybe out of the goodness of her heart, is like, why are you feeling that way? And that actually shuts me down more. And Kurt gave me this language to realize, yeah, I do want to get underneath and figure out why, but that actually engages. I think Kurt said in Kurt Thompson says in his book that that's more those left brain type questions, but actually who, what, when, where, and how, when done in a relational way, are getting after things on more of a right brain relational level. So you're opening up doors for genuine curiosity, having humility toward yourself and others. These types of questions can actually be much more fruitful than the why question.
Hmm. I want to dig into that a little bit further, but before I do, I want to just add to that for a lot of us, the word why can feel like an accusatory word. And so,
yeah.
So on two levels there, if you're listening to somebody else, and you hear them say, why am I doing this, or why is God allowing this? You might begin to interpret that as, I'm talking to listeners here, you might be able to begin to interpret that as, this person is already experiencing some shame or accusation around what their experience is. If you're listening to yourself use the word why, like, why do I keep doing this? Or why do I keep feeling this? That might reveal to you, or at least get you curious about, are you feeling on some level already judged about where you are? And if you are, then that's going to be really difficult for you to extend curiosity. That's the kind of fruitful curiosity that you're going to need in this journey. So, like, for example, I've known in my life, as a man who's wrestled with a lot of fear and anxiety, when I hear the why question rising up, why do I feel so afraid about this? There's already judgment behind that for me that reveals and has revealed to me and continues to reveal to me, I feel pretty bad about feeling fear. So instead of kind of just noticing the fear and being able to approach it with curiosity, I'm already judging myself. A man shouldn't feel fear like this. A man my age shouldn't feel fear like this. A man with this level of responsibility, whatever it is, I'm already putting judgment there, which shuts me down to some of the work I think, James, that you're trying to get after. So for whatever that's worth to listeners, James, let me press in a little bit to what you're saying. Like, make that concrete for us a little bit more. Like, so let me put you in the coaching seat for a moment. You're the coach, and your client is saying to you, James, I just acted out again. You and I have been working together for a good bit of time now, and I recognize that this triggered some old stuff in my heart, and I was feeling low about myself, or I was feeling trapped, or I was feeling helpless, or I was feeling whatever it might be. And instead of, and I know that's just part of my story. It's part of the history. Like that's what I kind of learned to do as a kid to survive, or that's all I could do as a kid because no one taught me how to do it differently. So instead of getting into why, like, okay, why did you do that? You're asking, when you talk about those other questions that Kurt Thompson recommends, how does that play out? How do you ask that question to a client? Or how might a listener ask that to themselves as they're trying to be curious about their story?
Yeah, I was imagining myself jokingly saying, "Why, Josh? Why'd you give in?" And I was just thinking about how much that would totally shut down the thing you just were setting up. It really does. I mean, think about that. If you imagine me, Josh just gave that tender confession. I said, "Well, why'd you do that?" Or, it just doesn't help that much. Here's where I love to go, Josh, these days, especially. Where do you feel that in your body? When you go back to that place of temptation or trigger, where do you feel that in your body? How are you doing emotionally? What's going on for you in your heart as you're reflecting on this even right now? This is one from our colleague Blake. He was just training our Awaken leaders. Our Awaken leaders are volunteers, but they're vetted and trained. And he was saying, who taught you to think that way? He's like, none of you came out of the womb thinking, I'm messed up, or I'm beyond repair. Let's just use that strong shame phrase. I'm beyond repair. None of us came out of the womb. Our brains weren't developed enough to have that type of thought, period. It's just a fact. None of us came out of the womb thinking that. So someone taught us to think that way. So when does that kind of thought, like you said, I'm now trying to remember exactly how you were phrasing stuff, but when you said that thing of I'm broken beyond repair, who in your life does that kind of idea come from? Like, did you learn that from a parent or from a famous figure or a classmate? So really these different, I keep looking back down at these 5 different classic, who, what, when, where, how type questions. And all of those can open more doors versus if I were to jump in with the why, I think it would have shut the door on the conversation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, even when you asked, and I know I was giving a hypothetical situation, but when you said, where do you feel that in your body? Even though I had just been talking on a theoretical level, I felt my emotional state, my own heart kind of just settle a little bit, like, oh, that is the question of somebody who is more interested in me than in fixing me, more interested in me than me getting this just right. And I think it presents an opportunity. Interestingly, if you look at the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve fell, the Lord's response to them, and there are multiple ways to read this, but the Lord's response to them is ask questions. Even as he learns about the truth of the situation. I say learns, it's probably safe to assume he knew exactly what happened, even more so than it demonstrates the humility and interest in their well-being that he comes with questions. Adam, where are you? Who told you you were naked? Did you eat? That's a yes or no question, so we might kind of pivot a little bit there. But actually, so many of the first things that God says that are recorded in Genesis 3 and onward are questions. Even when we get into Cain and Abel, the Lord comes with a question. And I know that one way a lot of people read those, just as an aside, is he's coming thundering with his questions. where are you? Who told you you were naked? I mean,
Mm.
but what if the tone is a loving father who's trying to help orient his his created beings, his beloved, orient them to the truth of their situation in kind of in some of the same way we're talking about.
Well, and even that yes or no question, Josh, in that context, in the relative youngness, you might say, of Adam and Eve and the innocence, like having them have that clear statement of yes or no, I did or didn't do this, could even be a blessing as part of the whole package of these deeper questions. So I
Mm.
see that, like you're saying, the heart of God is, where are you? What's, what's really going on? Who told you to, he actually gives that type of question. Who told you you're naked? And so they didn't come out of his creation knowing they were naked in that type of way. Who told you this? This is a thing that was planted. And Aaron, I know you've talked a lot about part of the work you're doing when you're coaching is unpacking some of those lies and trying to get in touch with like, who told you this? I think you have that same kind of mindset. I've heard you talk about it before.
Yeah, and I am so drawn to, because of just what Josh even just brought up, the ways that even when when Jesus is cornered, he doesn't give like he asks questions all the time. And I think like I almost get this visual sort of like in the spirit, like the like these questions are like swords that are just slicing off little pieces of shame.
Mm.
Because I think at the heart of what we're really talking about is, and some of the things, like, not knowing how to move forward. A lot of that I think comes from shame, because shame shows up in so many different ways. Um, I even looked up, like, we've done so many podcasts on here where we talked about shame and different things, but negative self-talk, feeling inadequate, fear and anxiety, isolation, avoidance, hiding or shrinking, thinking that you have to be perfect. So if you're not perfect, like, you know, sabotaging. There are so many different ways that shame shows up. It could be physical, it could be just mental or emotional, and it shows up in all of those different ways, for different people at different times. And I feel like by asking questions, you're sort of, slicing off a little piece of that shame.
Mm.
Let's get a little more curious about that. Why does that hit so hard? Or why can't, like, you're aware of this, and so again, like, the careful of those why questions, but
Yeah, Aaron.
yeah, I
Wait a
know,
second. I'm
right?
feeling
I know,
all
I'm
that peace
catching,
I was just feeling. Now I'm
yeah,
feeling. No, I'm kidding.
I'm catching myself, but okay, so you are aware. So just, I like to just speak back, oh, so you just named this. Where's the first place that you can remember experiencing that in your life? Oh, now I'm thinking about a particular moment.
Yeah.
And as I start to unpack that, whoa, I didn't even realize that carried as much as it does. All right, well, now, like, the rest of our session, we're like, well, let's unpack that thing. Like, let's, let's get back to that place with Jesus to begin to, maybe remove some of the things that need to be removed and let him heal what needs to be healed, that you didn't experience. Because again, so much of this is from our younger selves and in our stories. And like, I'm looking at the screen with you guys, man, we're like all in our, I think James is in his 30s now. I mean, I don't know. James is the youngest of all of us. But we have life, we have experience, right? And we are adult men. But when we were younger and we experienced something as boys and maybe didn't know how to unpack that or who to talk to, and we have this wound that we ourselves are like, oh, I guess I'll just throw some gauze on this thing. I don't know what to do with it. And then bam, now I'm 10 years older and that wound never healed, but I got older and it's still present in my body and my mind. And so so that's part of what we're talking about. How do we get after some of those things, even as our adult selves, when the wound we experienced was actually when we were younger, but it still shows up.
Yeah, love that.
By the way, Aaron, the way you ask those why questions is that was more of the tender invitational style, versus
Yes.
the primary we're talking about are the ones that you can feel are trying to do a quick fix instead of coming into the pain with you,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, so I love the way you said that, James, because and Aaron, I'm with James. I was kind of ribbing you. Even the tone and the what the why was with and how you asked. I think we're a little bit different, but
Mm.
The interesting thing about questions as opposed to statements and opposed to kinds of why questions that James you're pointing out are trying to bring a quick fix. A good question is relational. When I say something to you, and depending on your background, depending on how it hits or doesn't hit, it might stir something in you, and then there might be silence, and it could be a part of a conversation. But a good question is by definition relational because it's you're putting something out from one person to another to elicit something, to draw something out of another person that then the first person will hear. And it reminds me of the I can't remember who it was that who said it this way, but it's just so true. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's relationship. And so these younger parts of us that learned just how to survive probably learned it pretty much alone. Or if they learned it from somebody else, they learned it from somebody else who didn't really know how to relate well. Like you just turn the TV on. That's what I did as a kid. You just get in front of the TV, make a joke. So to be asked questions in this way does invite an exploration that's very relational. So guys, let me push this a little further though. Let's say, okay, now I've begun to look like you both brought up a kind of idea of when was the first time you remember feeling something like that, or who taught you to respond that way, or taught you to see it that way, or to feel that that in that situation, or think that way. So you're inviting people to look back at their childhood and connect dots between, oh, this present moment and the intensity of it, or the way that I felt stuck in it, didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't come out of it's a integrity flaw that's just somehow uniquely in me and I should be ashamed of it. There's actually something that connects to my story with it. And I can begin then connecting with that part of me, or grieving that. Or Aaron, I think you talked about, now we're in an entirely different kind of conversation. Light bulbs are going on and you're connecting that. So let's say now we've walked with a client to that place, and they know some of those old wounds. They know some of where this comes from and why these specific situations are difficult. And they're tempted. It's still hard. I know that this comes from that situation with my dad or my mom, or when I was picked on in grade school. And it's still firing in me. It's still, zinging in me. Like, does that mean I've missed a step? Is there something more for me to do in the processing? Is there something simply like, yep, you know what? You just tend to be tender in that area. And you need to learn something else to manage that in a different way. Like, where would you guys go with a client who knows their story is connected somewhere, but there's still like the pain of it still kicks in, and perhaps in addition to that, they're also still like then tempted to act out.
I think we have a couple really strong tools as coaches. Because we're not licensed therapists, we don't have like EMDR, which can be an awesome tool for unlocking and kind of healing some trauma using the way our eyes move to connect our left and right brain. Amazing. But some of the tools we do have are story work. So that is in a very practical way, it's both just discussing the story, processing like Aaron was saying, but also writing out the story, maybe 500 to 700 words or whatever, ideally even with perhaps handwritten. And what that does is it helps you to explore the story. And then when you read it to us as the coach, or even to your spouse or a close friend, you're bringing integration. You're actually entering into the pain in a relational way, because as someone was saying earlier, so much of the trauma we experience is because we're alone in it. So many of the wounds, even if trauma is too big of a word, so many of the wounds we experience are, I'm alone in this. I don't know how to overcome this. No one's there with me. And so story work can be an awesome way to connect some of those dots. That connects with grief work. So taking note of griefs, trying to enter into them emotionally. We actually, when this podcast is coming out, we're in the heart module of Awaken, and lessons 4 and 5 of the heart module are like kind of the heart of the heart module, where you literally take stock of your entire life, good, bad, and ugly, 5-year increments. That's grief work. It's getting in touch with the pain, which is the opposite of running from it. And then another awesome tool we have is healing prayer, because Jesus, speaking of being relational and entering into the story, he's outside of time, and he actually wants to meet us in our story. So sometimes I might assign a story, hey, that story sounded really significant. It seems like it's very connected to this wound. We kind of understand why, but do the story work, come with that. And then we might even enter into prayer. Jesus, where were you in the story? Jesus, what do you say to so-and-so in this story? So those are some of the sharpest tools, if you will, that we have to bring healing and integration. But I think the key, like you were saying, Josh, is not just uh, this idea of I'm just trying to get sober. It's actually relationship. God uses relationship with him and with others, healing relationships to heal us. They're really necessary.
Mm.
And so many of what you're describing is I'm alone in my temptation. What do I do in this moment? But I guess what I'm inviting us to is this bigger journey of let's actually process this in an effective, deep way. Let's actually see where Jesus was. Let's connect it relationally.
Well, and James, part of what I hear I mean, if I want to make this explicit to anybody who missed it, but because you talked about those either big T or small T traumas or wounds that people experienced and how they walked through them alone, which is one of the reasons that those pains can continue to persist and impact us as we move forward, is because of what we experienced alone, because we experienced them alone, or at least we interpreted the moment that we were alone in them. And then fast forward to temptation, which has these triggers, these stories that are underneath it. Our response to those then, when our response to the temptation is that we stay alone, that's probably a pretty good indicator that the wound there still is binding us into isolation, that we still have something to work through.
So good.
Out of that moment of isolation and say, I'm not alone. And I mean, I know in Awaken, the first module, the strength module, guys learn, pick up the 400-pound telephone and call. And if you don't have the nerve to call, then text, like connect to somebody else. And it's kind of like, it's treated like a fire drill. Like it's an emergency situation. Don't be alone in the temptation. But really the curve of Awaken and the curve that you're describing in coaching is we want to move beyond I'm reaching out simply because I'm tempted to I want to learn why I stay in these patterns of isolation in moments that are intense and difficult for me. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah. And we happen to be recording this. It's coming out after Christmas, but we're in Advent right now, guys, when we record this. And I just can't help but think of Jesus didn't just come to teach us. He didn't just come to die for our sins, as central as that is. He didn't just come to bring resurrection life and overcome the devil. All those are crucial. But he also came to be with us in the pain. It's Emmanuel, God with us. That is a key part of the gospel that I think we can often forget. He's modeling coming into pain when he did not need to. He's the only person who never needed to come into pain, and he chose to willingly. So this is the kind of God we serve, and this is the model for healing and being able to grieve as those with hope. We need that relational connection with him and others.
Aaron, let me pivot and ask you a question. What do you say to the man or woman who, again, is in this journey? They've begun recognizing some of the connecting the dots between the current temptation and some of the other, their story, the pain in their story, and they're feeling tempted, but they feel alone still in that moment. Like, so James is kind of giving us hey, here's some things to work on long term. But what about in the moment itself? Like, okay, obviously I have stuff to work on right now, but I'm also on a business trip and I'm in a lot of pain and I got to go get in a meeting in an hour. Like, what the H am I supposed to do right now? Like, what do you say to that person? How can they approach that differently than just kind of gritting their teeth and making it through?
Yeah. I'm thinking, about what you said earlier about, obviously the opposite of addiction is relationship or community. So I think even, part of, I don't know, this is tricky because maybe you don't feel like you have a sense of community, or people. because that's where my mind is inclined to go. Like, who can you reach out to? Like, who can you begin to sort of bring into sort of that inner circle like Jesus had, right? Like, who are your mat carriers? I think we talked about that on the show before.
Mat carriers meaning,
yeah, who can bring you the paralytic before Jesus?
yeah,
He couldn't do it himself. He needed others to bring him before the presence of the Lord. So who can do that for you? And if you don't have those people, I would, encourage you to do some work and sit with the Lord in that. Like, who can be some of those people? And maybe build some of that up. I think that's part of the work here, is to be able to do that and to see the need for that. And I think it starts also with your own posture of having some compassion there, again, instead of the shame. Like, just because a temptation shows up doesn't mean it's not a condemnation. It's not a like, oh, there it is again, guilty as charged. No, like, you haven't done, like, and hear me on this. Like, I think in my own journey, it took me some time to get to this place. Like, I haven't done anything wrong in this moment. This temptation is here. Like, I don't want it. Here it is. What do I do? Like, but I think from that moment forward, for so many, it feels like the condemnation. Like, it's here. Gosh darn it, it found me again. I'm already, I might as well already give up. And so I think, having some compassion in that moment to begin to understand, no, like, this can be here, and I can learn to show up differently when this shows up. I feel like when we have certain guests come to our doors, I think, we greet different people in different ways. Oh, it's so great to see you. Oh my gosh. Like, oh, how's blah, blah, blah. And then there's other people when we're like, oh, this is a tree guy, and this is like the 5th time he's been here this week. I don't want him to cut down anything. And I'm just like, hey, good to see you. Still thinking about it. Thanks. See you. Like, if we greet. So with this,
that's why he keeps coming back. You come, you gotta.
Yeah, I need to be firm on that, man. But you know what I'm saying? Like, when this shows up, like, we're not like excited. We're not like greeting, this as, like our BFF, but we still need to address that door. Yeah.
And I just sense the Lord in what you're saying. And I want to invite you to go a little further as you think about the man or woman listening who that's it. Like, you just touched a nerve when you said, well, yeah, when it shows up, of course I feel . So I want to tee this up for you and ask, like, in your experience, either you can do either or both of these, but either, okay, this thing comes knocking. You're not glad it's there, but there's lots of messages that are coming to you with it about you, shaming messages. If that's at your door, where is Jesus? What's his posture with you in that moment? So Aaron, yeah, what's your sense of what the Father says, or how the Father is postured in that moment when somebody's feeling the weight of temptations come and what it means about them?
Yeah. I mean, Emmanuel, God is with us. And I think it's a reminder in that moment, like, Jesus wants you to know, hey, even right now, even in the midst of this, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. Let's go out on the porch and talk to this sucker. Let's not ignore the door. Because here's the thing about temptation, right? Whether we respond or don't respond, it's probably going to still come back for some reason or another. And avoiding, it's definitely going to come back. Avoiding that tree guy definitely comes back. But so this is like in Unwanted, right? The stepping out onto the porch. And we've talked about that analogy. I think it's such an important thing to learn how to do. And it comes down to, I can do.
Say a little bit more about it, because for some people who haven't read Unwanted, what
Oh, sure.
illustration you're referring to?
Yeah, no, sorry. So it's kind of that idea, when sort of this, I'll call it an unwanted guest or whatever, right, comes knocking at your door. There are message there. There's something they want to communicate. So this temptation, there's something that it is communicating to you. But if you let it into the house in a welcoming kind of way, then it's sort of that resignation. It's that futility. It's the I'm already guilty, so come on in. And we don't want to do that. So he talks about stepping out onto the porch, neutral space, right? Not like engaging some, if you're thinking at home like, oh man, got the house to myself tonight, and I'm starting to get curious about some of these things, and I'm feeling tempted, and I'm in the dark, and I'm lonely, and I'm isolated. Like, that's probably not the front porch. Like, that's not a safe place to be able to step out and to have this conversation and listen to what this temptation is trying to tell you, right? And so that porch is I would say, kind of a neutral place where you could step in a protected way, and maybe it's in letting others know you're doing some of this work or whatever that might look like. So I think in the midst of that, right, like inviting Jesus, hey, like you said, you said you would never leave me or forsake me. Step out here with me on this porch right now, would you? As I talk to this guest. And I'm telling you, he is with you, and wants to be with you. This isn't like okay, fine, let's go out. Like, no, he's like, hey, you want to talk to this thing? Oh, yeah. Let's do it. I'm right here.
You're clarifying, like, the voice of the Lord is not the voice saying, like, why are you feeling this again?
Yeah.
Haven't we
yeah.
He said it's the voice of, hey, if we need to keep asking this thing why it keeps showing up, I'm with you. I'll go with you again. Like, let's keep getting after it. I almost get the picture of like a salient father figure, that there's a knock on the door and the kid is feeling all sorts of feels inside about, like, oh crud, not again, like, and is my dad going to hear this here? And the dad gets up. I have this beautiful picture of just a dad with his hand on a boy's shoulder, but like the dad's chest right against the back of the boy. Like, we'll go together, son. Like, you do not have to face this without me.
And that's it's empowerment. Like,
yeah,
moment, like Jesus is empowering you with his power to step out and to face, to not flee, right? To try to get to the bottom of this. What are you communicating? So again, that question I asked earlier, Lord, what do you want me to know about this temptation? What do you want me to know about the messages it's bringing? Sit with them on that. Literally journal, like, be with them in that. What comes to your mind? And then what do you want me to do about it, Lord? Maybe it's practical in the moment. Hey, get in your car, go see Eric. I don't know who Eric is if you're listening, but
if Eric's a safe, good friend,
right? If Eric's a good friend, go drive down by the river.
Hey, and let me give a little permission here too to listeners. Like Aaron mentioned earlier, like, hey, if you're all alone and you've got no resources, it might not be the time to try to dig into, like, why does this thing keep showing up? You might need to be a little more practical in that moment, but you have a father who knows, who understands, who's loving. Like, what would it be like instead of, like, so many of us move into the ritual of, like, well, I'm not going to answer the door, but I am going to isolate further. I'm going to disconnect from my emotions. I'm going to turn on the TV. I'm going to start to scroll. And the knocking's on the door and it's getting louder. I'm going to continue to scroll. And then there's something on the screen. The door's knocking even louder. And we know that. We've been down it a million times. What would it be like if the father might just say, like, hey, I know that right now is not a good time to have a conversation with that temptation at the door. So why don't you and I read a book?
Hmm.
Why don't you and I, hey, that movie that you know is a safe movie that you don't have to go scrolling to look for, it's a DVD or whatever. Like it's PG and you love it. And you know what? I love the part of you that loves it. Let's watch that together. I mean, the father is a good father. And there are times where it may be just like, we're just going to do something together that's not getting after it. But well, guys, we're running out of time. I want to, James, you've been quiet. As Aaron and I've been kind of chatting for the last few minutes, like anything burning on your heart that you'd say in kind of relation to some of the questions we're getting after in this podcast?
We have 2 hours left, right, for what's burning on my heart.
More
No, what's
questions.
burning on my heart, Dr. Jim Wilder says that maturity is the ability to endure hardship well.
Hmm.
And part of what we're recognizing, listeners, and this is totally me included, is I don't know how to handle hardship well. I don't know what to do when temptation knocks at the door. But actually, one of the key ideas of stages of maturity, growing as a child, is God helping us, ideally, as actual children, our parents are helping us know how to meet our needs in genuinely satisfying ways. I know how to care for myself in a genuinely satisfying way. Most of us don't know how. At least the people I walk with and myself. So many of us don't know how. And so I just love your invitation that the Father's trying to retrain us. Maybe you're 4 years old, 5 years old in this kind of stuck place, right? Like your inner child, so to speak, is like this young kid who just doesn't know how to care for themselves. They don't know what they need. And the Father is there to come and reparent us. One other quick thing I got to share, and we shared this in a previous podcast, but Mark and Deborah Laser have this amazing concept of the 7 desires of every heart. 7 desires that God has put in every heart: being heard and understood, being affirmed for what we do, being blessed for who we are, being safe, being touched in healthy, non-sexual ways, being chosen in that special one-on-one kind of relationship, and being included in a community. And so one invitation I have, in addition to everything Aaron was saying, one way you can actually look at this is not only where were these lacking growing up, because that can be a really helpful long-term exercise, but in the moment of temptation, which of these 7 things am I needing right now? This is if I need to feel heard and understood, I start with the Father, and then maybe I pick up the phone and call a brother or a sister or whatever. Or I'm really struggling to feel included, but is there a place I can go where I'm actually around people in a healthy way, or ideally even friendships and things like that? So I'm not sure that for everyone it's going to be super obvious or simple to meet all 7 of these needs in that moment, but part of what it means to grow through childlike maturity into adult level maturity, according to Jim Wilder, is learning how to have these needs met in healthy, holy ways. And I just find these really beautiful invitations that might actually give insight into, what am I really looking for? What do I think pornography or a hookup or whatever is going to satisfy? Is it going to make me feel touched or affirmed, or, so this can be a helpful place to go as well.
Well, and I think part of what you're doing there too is you're again, as opposed to I'm ashamed for what I'm experiencing right now, you can recognize that every single human being on the planet experiences the need, has the need, God-given need for these 7 things. And that's just one group's framing it up.
List. Yeah, totally.
So like, the need to be included. And you know what? It's 11 p.m. at night, and it's going to be really hard to find a community you feel can included right now in this moment. But can you honor, it's a really good desire.
Beautiful.
It didn't start with the temptation to go look at the degrading porn that you feel so ashamed about. Like underneath it, you want to be included, and can you grieve? Yeah, all week long I haven't, and I need it, and tomorrow I need to do something about it. Tonight, Lord, help me, and grieve.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful,
and that's enduring hardship well. That is a beautiful example of that. Yeah.
And just to be clear, I was giving it as like something I would aspire to, not something I think I do very well in my own life. But hey, Ron, any closing words from you that you're burning to say before I close this in prayer?
Yeah, just I think one last thing. And again, I think this comes maybe after some time, but thinking about that, the fantasy and that temptation, again, what is that? You're thinking about what it's communicating. What is it trying to help you avoid? It's almost this distraction, so move toward what that temptation or fantasy might be trying to avoid. And that might be, trying to protect you from, taking a healthy risk, or, relational vulnerability, emotional honesty in your relationship, maybe with your spouse or someone that's close to you, responsibilities that you might have, a calling you might have. And so I think that's a different way of thinking about that too, is, what actually, what can you move toward that's sort of the opposite of what this is trying to do in that present moment.
I love that. And actually, I didn't realize when I asked you to share something that you felt like you was burning, that you were going to be talking right to me. So I appreciate that. But I do think that's not something that we've done a podcast on before, that specific topic. And I think that could be something to unpack even further. That's really good. Hey, listen, you guys are beautiful men. And I so appreciate the conversation with you today. I think you're modeling well. And I hope our listeners hear from you just the invitation to kindness towards ourselves and relationship. And I love the way you guys model this in your own lives as you aspire to these things. And I love the way that you model that kind of kindness and reparenting as you're walking with men in the groups you run and in the one-to-one coaching. So if you're listening and there's something that kind of taps something for you today, either you're curious about digging into it and would like to have a few sessions with one of these guys or one of the women on our team, or if it's something like, hey, I think I actually need to go further, I've never explored these things, we're here. So Lord, thank you that you are God with us. Would you continue to invite us and help us to hear your invitation, Lord, to walk with you and not to detach from you, and our listeners too, we pray. We love you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.